Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Desmond Grant, CIO at Littleton Public Schools. Desmond, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Cyberlinks. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? Cyberlinks sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time, so you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after. Learn more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyber, Lynx.com. And now back to our show. Desmond, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Littleton Public Schools and your role there as CIO?
Sure. So Littleton Public Schools, we're located in Littleton, Colorado, which is about 15 minutes or so southwest of the Denver metro area. Obviously, we're a suburb of the metropolitan area. I'm in my second year as the CIO with Littleton Public Schools and having a phenomenal time. Obviously, we face many challenges of K12s, but in the K12 industry, but despite those challenges, Littleton has a great reputation across the state as well as the nation as a high-performing school district. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, glad to have you, and you're out there doing great work. I mean, I think everybody recognizes and appreciates how important that early childhood education really is, how formative. But you kind of touched on some of the, that you have challenges, and I think there are so many facing schools, right? Especially public schools. You've got funding issues. You've got, parent issues. There are a million things that come into play here. But let's start with, it's got to be really challenging as CIO, unlike a CIO of, say, some Silicon Valley startup that's got lots of money. They can do what they want. You've got serious constraints when it comes to money. How do you balance that in the kind of K through 12 industry? Kind of making sure that everybody gets the technology they need, that you stay safe, and yet deal with, certainly not an unlimited budget.
No, definitely. Obviously, yeah, you're exactly right. It's definitely a challenge. Obviously, we have different funding mechanisms, but even then, there's certain limitations to those funding mechanisms. Obviously, the primary way that we are funded is primarily per pupil. How many students do we have in our district? And then there's a state allocation based on that. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we're starting to see in the state and across the nation, is that enrollment is declining all over the place, and it's declining for a number of reasons. The birth rates are low across the nation. So obviously, where your kids are coming from, they're just not there. We're also seeing an increase in school choice, and that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong. But when you're in public education, that takes away from the amount of kids that are available to come to schools, because they're going to private school, charter school, homeschool, and it's just creating a limited opportunity on how do you bring those kids into the system. So that has become a very huge challenge for us. And then, of course, there's the state deficit that Colorado has been facing. That has been big news. And I know other states in the nation are dealing with very similar situations where, now you've got that pot or that pot, and how do you slice that up? Because you've got Medicaid, you've got K12, and obviously all of these categories are very important. But when there's a limited pot and there's a deficit associated to that pot, you're all fighting for the same slice of pie at that particular point. So it becomes very challenging for us. But at the same time, we've gotten very creative. We look at that pot, we look at other pots, we look at grant opportunities. We look at the value of the resources that we have available to us, and then we talk about how do we reprioritize those to make sure that it's going to the best places that it's supposed to, which ultimately is our students and our staff. And particularly in K12, it's been more challenging because we have become, and when I say we, I talk about just technology dependent. That they rely on technology because it is core to what everything that we do in K12, and so we have to make sure that what we provide for them is sustainable, it's performant, it's secure. So I message that on a consistent basis, so that whenever there's a challenge to maybe a critical need, I make sure to say, okay, well, if this pot of money is going to be taken away, this is how it's going to impact education from a technology standpoint. And then basically that raises another argument for us to consider, whether it be the executive leadership team, whether it be board or whether it be a conversation that we have with the community, so they understand that the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of their kids. So we have those hard conversations. We make those difficult decisions to make sure that we are moving forward in the best way possible. But it doesn't take away from the challenge, and it gets difficult every single year. But we try those paths. We look at other opportunities. One of the things I'm looking at right now is how can I create revenue streams for the district? And there are several different things that we're looking at and investigating to help us to get through these challenging times. And then there's also opportunities for us to increase some of our budget streams, but those are required by our community because they have to vote. We're talking about mill levy overrides or mill levies, bond opportunities for infrastructure and technology upgrades and things of that nature. And these are things that we're all having discussions about right now that depending on how things go over the next several years, we will definitely have to rely on to help us sustain what we're trying to do.
So you mentioned revenue streams. How do you do that as a school? I mean, I get it as a business, private business, perfect sense. That's, core to everything. How do you do that, in a school district like that?
It is difficult because, obviously with the rules and regulations that we have, there's only so much that you can do. But there are definitely some opportunities that, for example, I remember I was with Rural Public Schools before, not directly before this, but several years back. And working with our CL there was a partnership that we did with cell phone companies in regards to where they could actually put cell phone towers and things of that nature, partnering with our internet service providers for co-locations. And that was an opportunity that we were able to create revenue streams by partnering with them that says, okay, we've got an allocation of space as long as you pay us a certain amount of money for that space. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at. There's also assets that we have that we could potentially sell that allow us to generate revenue. And this is something that we've done in the past prior to me. So those are some of the things that we'll be looking at doing as well. So, I mean, obviously, we've got to be very careful about what we do. We want to be strategic about those decisions. But even though there's limitations, we definitely have opportunities to still create revenue streams.
That's brilliant and creative and yeah, you're right, making the most of what you've got. But I can't help but think, today for every organization, one of the biggest challenges, how do you defend against these machine speed attacks, right? The bad guys they're using AI to come at us at machine speed. Humans cannot defend against that, right? So you have to have systems in place to defend against that. And I love products like Darktrace that uses AI in that way to see what's going on and defend in real time and be able to stop these things. So I love that, and I think that's great. But I wonder, for a private organization, it's an easy sell. It's like it makes sense. This is how the bad guys are coming at us. This is how we defend against it. So how's that work on the public school side? Like that's a real threat. But on top of that, unlike an organization, you've got kids' privacy to worry about. You can't have bad guys getting access to kids' laptops that are in their bedrooms while they're working on stuff. And that's a huge, issue. So how do you go about kind of allocating the resources to that when there's so many demands on your finite resources as a school? Does that compete at a high level? And like, look, how this is a real threat to everybody right now. We can't ignore it. Or it's like, look, we've had these issues for decades that we have to, and that consumes all of our bandwidth and all of our money. So how do you balance that? This is a tough one. And how do you go about that?
No, it's I think first education, and when I mean education is educating our stakeholders. So, for example, last year, my team and I gave a presentation to our Board of Education, and we called it the State of Cybersecurity in K12, specifically Littleton Public Schools. And we talked about, how we're addressing some of these challenges given our limited resources. And you're right, it's definitely a challenge, but I think that we've done a pretty good job over the past several years to build a cybersecurity program and be sustainable in certain ways. Obviously, that's being challenged on a day-to-day basis, but we were able to successfully present that to our board and say, okay, this is what the current state is, particularly for Littleton Public Schools. So really educating them on where we're at, also some of the challenges that currently exist and what we're currently facing. We hear it all the time and we see it all the time. I'm pretty sure you've got over the past month at least one letter about some organization that you're affiliated with having a breach or some type of cybersecurity event and things of that nature. It's unfortunate because we've gotten to the point where we're getting immune to it because it's happening so often. But for us in K-12, that doesn't take away from the responsibility and the obligation that we have to protect student and staff data. So we make sure to articulate that and do the very best that we can. There are frameworks that we have in place. We are part of an organization called K12-6. It is primarily cybersecurity membership, in which they help us with a framework very similar to like NIST, where there's controls and standards that we're a part of and we apply to kind of help us, because it's something where I unfortunately do not have the funds to bring in cybersecurity experts in-house. So I have to pretty much crowdsource my resources in a certain way. We have kind of adopted a virtual team internally, where we basically telling every domain expert, whether it be networking, systems administration, or even endpoint technology, to say, okay, you're going to focus a certain percentage of your time of technology that is a part of your domain. We're going to meet on a regular basis. We're going to talk about some of the challenges. We're going to put certain initiatives in place to make sure we're attacking security from a crowdsourcing element, if you will. One of the things I'm also looking at doing is bringing in a cybersecurity managed security service provider, because now I can leverage a bench of cybersecurity resources that aren't necessarily in-house, but I'm just paying a service fee to an organization that says, okay, we can cover you from any aspect that you want. I don't have a data privacy expert. Fine. I'll resource them from you. If I need someone who's going to do penetration testing, I'll resource them from you. So basically looking at a third party or an outsourced organization to do that work helps me in areas that I don't necessarily have those resources. So for me as a CIO, with the limitations that I have, it's really about education, educating our stakeholders on what our needs are, and where we can pull resources, and crowdsourcing those resources to accomplish the tasks.
That's great. So one of the I guess hot button topics, I'm going to say, for I think every parent, right, and schools right now is screen time, right?
Mhm.
There's I get it, right? From both sides, it's, what effect is it having on the kids? Is this positive? And you tackle on top of that, the fact that we're becoming this technology dependent society. Every day we become more and more dependent on it, and we rely on it for everything. So there's clearly a balance of, you want to raise kids who are technologically savvy, but also educated, and not just outsourcing all their brain power to, now AI. So how do you balance this in the school system? Is there, do you take that, hey, look, we're going to lean in on technology, and we're going to say that this is going to be positive? Do you go the other way? Where do you fall on the spectrum here? And how do you kind of convey this to the kids and parents? Like, this is why we landed here.
Yeah. I think we have to go back first a little bit. And what I mean by going back is, let's go back to COVID. So when you go through the COVID period, we created this dependency on the technology, and because we had no choice.
Yeah.
Unless we decided that we were just going to stop education for all of our students, which we did not want to do. We had to basically give every student advice. We had to increase our technology resources in order for them to learn remotely, and obviously that lasted several years. The challenge, though, is now that we're in 2026, we still kind of operate in that mindset, even though we don't live in that time anymore in regards to the technology. And a lot of that is due to, from COVID until now, the significant increase in ed tech companies and the resources and technologies that they provided to K-12. It's big business, okay? And I think, again, we're still stuck in that mindset to a certain degree, because a lot of school districts have become one-to-one with technology, so that we're just saying, okay, well, we're going to continue to depend on that technology, not necessarily asking the question about, okay, well, how is this helping or hurting our students? Dr. Jared Horvath did a Senate hearing committee earlier this year, in which he talked about that, and he leveraged statistics and research that stated that technology really isn't hurting our kids, it's hurting our kids. Now, there are obviously people on both sides of the fence that feel a certain way about what he said. But what I think it caused us to do is to start taking a closer look at the data and start helping us to ask questions. We've had parents come in and had share those very same concerns. They're valid concerns. I think we have to have those discussions, and we have to start looking at the data to determine whether or not we need to be making some adjustments. So what we're doing is we're currently doing an audit where we're looking at all of the technology resources that we have, not just hardware, but also software subscriptions that we have. We're having conversations with our teachers and our principals. We've done a survey to ask them how they're using technology on a day-to-day basis. We are also looking at, we've got tools to help us look at the internet activity, the type of apps that the students are using. Is it educational? Is it non-educational? Specifically what, and even how long they're on their devices. So for us to start having conversations based on the data that we're looking at will help us make informed decisions, as well as have informed conversations about decisions to be made in the future regarding the amount of technology use in the classroom.
I mean, that seems like a really prudent way to go about it, right? I mean, how do you argue with that, right? We're doing some research, we're looking at it, we'll see where the numbers, fall. And I think everybody is looking at AI these days and is concerned, like, what do we do with this, right? Especially when it comes to education, right? You're going to have kids who are using it to do their homework. You want kids to be the whole idea is to prepare them for the future so they can be productive members of society, which means that they'll need to be able to interact with AI and utilize it. However, how do you balance that with education today? And I think this is a really fascinating, place that we find ourselves in an interesting time in history where this new technology is arriving and it kind of changes everything, even when it comes to how we educate our children. So I'm kind of curious, where are you currently on that? Where do you see it playing a role, if any? Where do you fall?
So, this has been since my time here at LPS. This has kind of been one of the top priorities for me. And I remember last year when I started, it was really about me focusing on just kind of getting the lay of the land of the district, understanding kind of our challenges, our priorities, learning the district. So I knew exactly how to really establish priorities and direction and strategy for us. And when it came to AI, I felt that yes, it's here, but I felt, we have a little bit of time before we really started addressing policy and guidance principles and things of that nature. Not to say that we didn't have those conversations, we did, but I felt like we had a little bit more time. And then in the span of a year, I looked back and said, oh, we're behind because it moved that quickly. To your point, we are no longer in the exploratory phase of AI. We have moved past that point. We are now in the point of intentional use of AI, and we need to make sure that we're building the guardrails in order for us to be successful with it. I heard something not that long ago that I've adopted because I thought it was true. It's not whether you're pro AI or not. It's whether or not you're pro AI literacy. And the meaning of that basically is you may feel a certain way about AI, whether or not you want to use it or not. But if at least you're AI literate, you're informed about the approach and the use of AI. And I've adopted that mindset because I think that that's exactly right. So there are people, even in our own district, that are not very fond of AI. That's fine. But at least if you're AI literate, you can justify your thinking and your reasoning behind it. Just as the same as the case if you're for it, the same thing. So I think that's the approach that we've taken over the past year. I've partnered with our learning services department, and we put together an AI task force. And the focus of the AI task force was to bring in staff, educators and non-educators, bring in leaders, bring in students to put together a framework in how we would actually evaluate, adopt, and utilize AI within our district. We actually presented it to our district leaders last month. We presented it to our board this month, and we're going to be finalizing it and releasing it officially at the start of the 26-27 school year this August. And what that really does is it identifies what AI is for people, but more importantly, it defines how we're going to use AI based on our principles, Littleton Public Schools principles. And we've established pillars based on cybersecurity and data privacy, based on teaching and learning integration, based on policy and ethics. Those pillars to establish this is what we're going to look at. This is how we're going to make our decisions. And this is how we're going to guide you in the use of AI moving forward. Professional development is something that we're going to also spend time on, which has been also a challenge for K12 as well, regarding not just AI, but just in general, but more so when it comes to technology and AI, because, it has been a challenge to get in front of teachers because they're so constrained. There's so much time that's spent with, daily tasks, administrative tasks, lesson planning for students, being there for their students. So trying to find that time that is not associated directly with teaching is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But we've been able to come up with some ways that we're going to be pushing with some packaged training, some asynchronous training next year that we hope to kind of help them in their evolution and use of AI.
That's great. What about AI when it comes to security, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think when we hear AI now, we think the Chat GPTs, the Claudes, and how you can kind of leverage that. Now, the soon to be, or kind of the burgeoning agents, and okay, cool. And but I think what I get really excited about is AI when it comes to security, right?
Mhm.
And using things like machine learning in the right ways, not just throwing some large language model onto a security product that now you introduce prompt injection vulnerabilities. So I think this is a fascinating area where we see the bad guys using AI against us. What do we do, to defend ourselves? And I think AI in security is really important. But I also think that it's often very overlooked because the big, the loud, kind of interesting portion is on utilizing AI in operations, and how do people leverage it to, hey, write my email, hey, answer this, help me think through this. Fantastic. Teach me about this. Great stuff. But at the core of everything that we do is this, information, infrastructure. And it is under daily attack from bad guys who now are getting billions of dollars a year because they've found ways in and they can ransom us. And so how do we combat that? To me, I see that as that this is the place where AI is going to be most impactful, because I see being an optimist. I think in my crystal ball, the good guys end up winning this by leveraging AI to shut out the bad guys completely, right? I see a path forward to where this is a full win, for the good guys, and and that's with the use of AI. I don't care what the bad guys do. We've got the right defenses, so it doesn't matter. It'll just be little pea shooters. It won't even affect us. Ding ding, just going to bounce off of us. We're going to be good. That's how I see it playing out. But I'm really curious on kind of your end, from the school's perspective, and again, going with all those limitations, where do you fall on, when it comes to AI and security?
So I think for us, it starts with in the way that we've been dealing with data. And I think when we talk about data, kind of again, the one of our pillars as a part of our framework, cybersecurity and data privacy. So whenever we now look to have contracts with companies, regardless whether it's just AR or not, just in general because of the data, do we have a data privacy agreement? What does that data privacy agreement say? How are they going to protect our data? And how are they going to partner with us to make sure our data is protected? So I think that's step one. I think then step two, when we're talking about not only internally our use of data or the data that we're sharing with companies based on our affiliation with them, and how we're using that data, is data governance. How do we have our data structured? So therefore, whether it's when we're talking about AI, how AI is utilizing that data, I think is going to be important the way that we're looking at data governance, understanding where that data is, who has access to it, how is it protected, things of that nature. And that is a struggling concept for a lot of organizations. I'm not even going to say K12, but public sector in general.
Yep.
Even private sector, I think, struggles with this. And so it's even more so when you get into the public sector because you don't have a lot of expertise in that space, particularly when you go into public sector where they don't necessarily have those resources.
Yep.
So I think that is one area that that we struggle with, but it's conversations that we're having. One of the things that we're going to be looking to do next year is create a data governance committee, which to help us ask some of those basic questions about where's the data, who's using it, how we're using it across multiple disciplines: HR, finance, IT, nutrition services, things of that nature. So we have to start somewhere, and I think that's where we start for us. But then you go up another tier, and then it's those integration points, because that's where AI is going to thrive. Because once you've got a data privacy agreement, Then once you have data governance in place, so you understand how your data is being protected and how it's being used and who has access to it. But then now you're saying, okay, we're going to throw a third element into that, and it's beyond the human. Now it's AI. And you've got to then get to a point where you are putting the right measures in place to quote unquote trust AI with that data. And that's where I think a lot of people, including myself, get uneasy. So for us, we're trying to limit that until we have a better understanding of those previous elements first, and then we step into it at a very cautious process, a progress road. I think we do the whole crawl, walk, run approach, and I think that helps us become very protective before we completely expose any of our data and our process to AI. But it's not that I don't think that we should get there. I think that there's opportunities. But we just want to make sure that we're doing it cautiously.
No, I think that is the prudent route, and one of the things I think is really important, as the large language models have taken kind of center stage in the AI movement, but the real trailblazer and the workhorse is machine learning, and I don't think it gets enough attention, especially when it comes to security. The machine learning isn't doing the same thing. It's not gobbling up all your data. It's now looking for, hey, this is normal. Great. Something just changed. I don't know why Adobe is trying to encrypt this file, but I'm going to stop it because Adobe doesn't normally do that. I don't know why Desmond is sending out, trying to send out emails at 3 o'clock in the morning because normally he doesn't. So I'm going to just, stop this because these emails don't even sound like Desmond. So I'm going to stop this, not written like him, not written at the same time. This is abnormal stuff. I'm going to stop it. So I like that aspect of AI when the machine learning and as more companies start really leveraging that to where we don't have the data privacy issues that we have like we do with large language models that just kind of consume it. Now it's in there somewhere. I don't know what it's doing with it, and it could do all kinds of stuff because now it's an agent and it gets to run free. How do we contain it? We don't have those worries with machine learning. Is this normal? Great. This is not normal. Let me stop it and call for an adult. So I really like that, and I think that's going to be, the unsung hero of the AI battle against the bad guys. So as they come at us with AI agents that are attacking and finding vulnerabilities, let's face it, we can't patch things fast enough because the bad guys find a hole. Then it's like, oh, hey, we found a hole. Even when you have good guys looking for the holes. Now that we have AI doing that, and looking, we're finding holes that have existed for decades. And we're like, huh, crazy. So clearly the old idea of patching or the idea of patching is antiquated in the modern day. What we need is to say, whatever system we're using, doesn't matter how many holes it's got in it, we need a way of defending this in its totality. And it's not the old method of firewalling it off. It's all blocked off. Nobody can get to it. That's ridiculous because that doesn't work. You can't just unplug it and bury it and be like, great, all of our data is safe. Sure, it's underground and it's unplugged. Okay. So you need a way for it to be accessible and usable and know that there are vulnerabilities that are going to be exploited. So what's the system that we have that can see that, oh, that system's being exploited. Let me stop that. We can't do it with humans. We can't do it with this, a standard SIM product. You can't do it with just EDR. These things aren't gonna cut it. So it's those products that are leveraging machine learning now to keep everything safe. So those are the things I think that get really exciting, and I look forward to that industry maturing because I do think that that's where we win the battle. For when it comes to security against the bad guys, because right now we've funded them hugely, but we need to turn the tide of this war.
I agree, but to a certain extent, because here's the when you were kind of sharing your thoughts on that, one of the things that I thought about, and you mentioned it too, when you look at some of the old tool sets and resources, like logging, SIEMs, and EDR, you need people there to configure, to monitor, to tweak and adjust consistently.
Yep.
So you would think, okay, well, introduce AI, it can now do that on the fly to a certain extent. Yes, but to your point, LLMs are training on a consistent basis, and it's being trained by a human on the back end. So you're still going to need that resource, and I think that is no different from us. And I also started thinking about, your initial question, and about some organizations are saying, okay, we're not going to partner with organizations for services in AI. We're going to build our own. We're going to build our own LLMs, and we're going to train them internally. And there's actually several school districts. I talked to one a couple of months ago that they're doing exactly that. They have the resources to do it. They have their expertise to do it. And, I think that's a great road to go to, because now you've got those resources, your data, you can protect your data without having to rely on outside parties to do so. And I think that's, if you can do that, that's great. More power to you. But for those who cannot, like us, we have to be, more cautious. We have to be, have to scrutinize things a little bit more. But I still think it's still going to require that expertise to get to that point, because I don't know if we can entirely trust AI to do it all for us. I think you're always going to, and we talk about this now. It's a part of one of our principles. There always has to be a human in the loop. Now, given the evolution advancement of AI, you're going to reduce the number of humans in the loop. I think that's a guarantee, but you're always going to have a human in the loop. So it's where are they? What expertise do you need? And what resources do they need to be supported to basically get the benefit and the value out of AI to automate those workflows and those tasks, like you said.
Yeah. And I think that the right place is when that human, is in the, after AI has done what it needs to do to stop the imminent threat. Oh, I see this is abnormal. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to call for an adult. That's the time. You call for the human to take a look and be like, yep, Desmond, this was Desmond writing at 3 o'clock in the morning. He had something important going on. Yeah, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, so he wasn't writing like he normally does. Fine.
Right.
Totally cool. Great. But you see things even like with the MGM breach, let's call it, right? That was, you get an example of an organization with basically unlimited resources financially that takes security as serious as could possibly be. It's a casino. They're constantly worried about people stealing from them and getting in. So they've got all the resources possible, and yet look at what happened, right? It was the humans that got outsmarted, and tricked. A basic con job, a very advanced con job, and it was well timed, well executed, well played, well done, and they made a lot of money by doing it. However, had there been something in place to say, wait, this isn't normal. This admin just got here, and all of a sudden they're running around doing all kinds of stuff. Hold up. That is not normal for day one admin work. I'm sorry. I don't know what Joey over here does, but Joey just started and has no business doing this. I'm going to stop Joey right now because I don't even have a baseline for Joey, and he's doing stuff that other admins don't do. So there's a great example of where AI would have stopped that, right? Machine learning would have been like, that's abnormal behavior, but humans can't catch it. So I think the solution that we'll see in the future, and again, we see it with some products, and they're maturing, and they're really great. That some have been around for a long time that they're doing this. The how quickly they're being adapted, I think, is interesting, because I think the timing is right for these products. I think this is the security wise, it's the answer. Privacy wise, it's the answer. And I like where it's the human is after the fact, right? The AI does everything. It's not an AI agent that's out there running amok, doing all kinds of stuff. I've conducted a hostile takeover of IBM for you. What? Right? Like, your Ferrari is on its way. Like, hold up. And none of that. But being able to have that machine learning kind of version of AI doing what it does best is, I think, the solution. And I get really excited about things like, when we see Claude Mythos, it'll be really cool as that gets, rolled out, to then be able to say, hey, take a look at our stuff and find where do we stand, and be able to find vulnerabilities and kind of, really help solidify your defenses, strengthen them in a way that we were never able to before, right?
Yeah.
At the same time that the bad guys are going to be doing that, but now we get that on our end as well. So those things about AI really excite me. However, and I know I'm going on and on, but you said something earlier that I think was really, really cool, about you don't have to like AI, but you have to be AI literate, which I think the brilliance and the depth of that, becomes almost philosophical, because when you look at that statement, that people are afraid of AI because it's change and because it's
Yes.
different. And
Yes.
that is no different than any other form of fear, right? Whether it becomes discrimination, whether it becomes fear of people with different views, different anything. I think the brilliance of this, of what you said there, is that it forces you to take, if you actually implement that. And I think AI is one of these really, it's in this interesting place where it's not a person, it's not a it's not necessarily an idea, an ideology. It is a technology which gives us just enough distance from it to where everybody has to deal with it. So I think this actually helps people dig into their own biases and their own issues with everything. Because how do you go about being literate about something that you don't necessarily like? That
Yeah.
is a really cool challenge. And I think the way you put that puts people in a position to where they might actually be better people by
Hmm.
doing that. Like,
I agree.
fascinating.
I completely agree because, whenever we give presentations about AI and we talk about hallucinations, we talk about bias, and we cover that as a foundational element of AI always at the very beginning. But then the detractors are always, well, this is just supporting why we shouldn't be using AI. And we're saying, no, that's not necessarily the case. What we're saying is you as a human need to understand that the tools that you're using has some of these shortcomings, if you will. But once you understand that and you know how to utilize that and then advance your level of use of the tool, that actually could give you more benefit than you typically would using any other tool. Okay. Now, something you mentioned earlier too was um, when you start thinking about where we're at with AI and comparing it to the internet, comparing it to social media, the cell phones, and things of that nature. When we come to K-12, I think what I've always been fearful of with AI is that we haven't learned our lessons from the previous technology advancements. And that kind of brings us back to what are we doing to prepare our students, to prepare our teachers to utilize this tool the right way, should you choose to? Again, being AI literate. If you choose not to, that's great, but at least you understand the pros and the cons of the tool and the capabilities. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And that's something where I felt like, as a society, we haven't learned from those lessons. And I think we have to. There's a video that I show and also do presentations from a gentleman by the name of Kai-Fu Lee. He is a prominent computer scientist. He's written several books on AI. He's an entrepreneur from Taiwan. And he actually did a 60-minute piece, and this was back in 2019, where they had asked him how he felt the significance or the impact of AI was. He said that he felt like it was going to be more significant than anything in mankind, including electricity. And when he said that, I thought, okay, that's hyperbole. But then when I started asking that question to other people in my presentations, I remember, I mean, I've done a number of presentations. And I remember going from the very beginning where maybe one or two people raised their hands. And the last time I did that presentation, I shared that with people. A third to almost half the people in the room raised their hands agreeing with that statement. So that lets you know we're in significant times. We're in a fork in the road. What do you do about it? And I think to me, and again, it comes back to being AI literate and making sure you understand the technology to make the best informed decisions for yourself or whoever you're using this tool with or for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have been said any better. Desmond, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You brought up some really great topics and ideas. I hope everybody gets a chance to really dig in and think about them because these are great topics. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Littleton Public Schools?
Yeah, definitely feel free to, go to my LinkedIn. You just search for my name, Desmond Grant. Obviously, you can learn more about me there. And then also search for Littleton Public Schools. And we've actually upgraded our website last year. It was done in partnership with our communications department. They actually took the lead on it, did a phenomenal job there. So you can learn more about the district. You can learn more about the initiatives that we've got going on right now and kind of the next steps that we're doing to prepare for the upcoming school year.
Well, it sounds great. And thanks for coming on. And until next time.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.